Minnesota basketball fans, welcome back to the Living in Loserville podcast. He's Aaron, I'm Chris, and we're here to talk some Minnesota Timberwolves basketball. Now, if you've listened to the show, you know we do close with some Gopher basketball as well, but we're going to basically focus here at the All-Star break. 31-28 are the Timberwolves. Since we've last did a show, they were 3-3, which is right around 3-3, 4-2, where we thought they could be. So we'll have a little bit of thoughts from the last few games during that stretch. We'll take a look a little bit where we're at in the standings and the goals and whatnot. But also, if you look at the schedule, it's kind of funky coming out of the break. So this week off is needed, though. You can definitely tell the fatigue mentally and physically has kicked in. We'll talk a little bit of variety of different type of defenses we're playing lately. The lack of a trade on trade deadline, that's something that we haven't discussed just yet. Just our overall thoughts. Pat B got extended. J-Mac's been playing great these last few weeks. Just a variety of stuff. And like I said, we definitely will close the show with the Gopher stuff. It's been a rough go. Speaking of wear and tear, man, we knew that they were going to wear down from the amount of minutes those starters. Basically, like 6 guys have to play, and really 4 guys. But it's evident right now, very evident. Anyway, we'll get into it in just a second. If this is your first time listening to the Living in Loserville podcast, welcome. It's available in a variety of areas. You can go to Blog Talk, or actually it streams live on blogtalkradio.com/Rope-A-Dope Radio. You don't have to download the show there at Blog Talk and Rope-A-Dope or listen to the browser. You can find this year basketball podcast under the Rope-A-Dope Radio podcast on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Player FM, TuneIn, Amazon Music, variety of other places. We're also part of the Grilling Shoe Sports Podcast Network. While you're at it, why don't you head on over to thegrillingchew.com. And one more place here, Living in Loserville Spreaker. Over a year ago, Aaron started this page. That's Living in Loserville Spreaker. Of course, there's a bunch of archive stuff. Every week we update it, or Aaron update it. And he also has some podcasts of his own you may like. So it's Living in Loserville Spreaker. One more thing. If you're thinking about cutting the cord, or you're not quite happy, I got something for you. It's called DirecTV Stream. The prices start as low as $69.99 a month. It's the best of live TV on demand. No annual contracts, no hidden fees. If you upgrade the Choice or Ultimate package, that'll give you 3 free months of HBO Max. Plus, you can enjoy regional sports networks with no additional fees. If you go all the way to the Premier package, that'll give you HBO Max and Showtime included in the monthly fee. That's DirecTV Stream. Okay, so basically, like I said, 3-3. Heading into the break down the stretch. It's nice to be above 500. It's only the second time basically since that season that we all know, that 2003-2004 season. It's been a long time since we can be in mid-February and be happy where we're sitting. Sure, would you like to be a little higher? Sure, we could definitely say that, but definitely like where they're sitting. I'm going to go ahead and bring in Aaron, my co-host. What's going on, Aaron? How the heck are you? I know you're, a little down and out as far as feeling like crap today.
Yeah, I got a little virus. I don't know what it was, but you're right. It has been an awful long time since we've had a positive outlook in this late in February. Or, there's been a lot of questions that have been flying around this time of year, but usually we're looking at 17 and 30 something or something like that. So it's nice to be above 500, although it's a little bit, and like you said, we would like it to be a little bit more. But, we can't complain at all at this point. Obviously, the team went through a nice stretch of games. Didn't necessarily end well last night, but for the most part, they've been winning more than they've been losing, and they've been beating bad teams, and that's kind of what you want to see.
Yeah, last night the shooting was just not that they didn't get the open looks. They definitely did, and you could even see in the post presser, Finch was not all that pissed off or anything like that because he knew we played hard. We were playing somewhat better defense in general, but the shots were just not falling, man. I mean, it was when you look at it, Edwards got to the line 10 times. 6 out of 10 isn't great, but he was 0 of 8 overall and 0 for 5 from 3. Towns was 2 of 3. Pat Bev was 2 of 4 from 3, but D'Lo 2 of 8. Prince only took 3, hit 1. McDaniels 1 of 7. McLaughlin 0 of 2, and good old Beasley 2 of 10, coming off like 0 for 8. So that can happen, right? But you're right. It was a little rough down the stretch of that game. It was a winnable game. They just couldn't quite get over the hump. I am getting a little bit of an echo. Okay, I think it's gone now.
Well, I was going to say, over the course of a season, Chris, I mean, if you're not the Timberwolves, you're going to lay a few eggs. Now you try to keep that to a minimum, but yeah, the shots aren't falling. You're going to have nights like that. And, you can step up defensively, and, that's the cliches, get hardened up on defense and try to win a game, but that's not always going to happen, and you're going to have off nights. And, it hasn't been too many this season where you go, the shots just weren't falling. Now, like you said, whether that's fatigue or, just general drain, it's hard to tell, but there are going to be nights, even the best teams have nights where the shots aren't falling.
Yeah, definitely. It just, for the fact that we got the open shots, does make a big thing. I think that's quite nice in fact. But the night before with Charlotte, they were down 13 points. They got off to a great start. The Hornets kind of chopped all the way into the lead that they had gotten early, and they were down 58-52 at half or something like that. And like I said, in the fourth quarter, down by 13. And I really like what I saw. I mean, there's a variety of people that we could point out down the stretch. McDaniels, D'Lo, yada, yada, yada. But Cat was just a monster. I think he had 19 points in fourth quarter and OT, just going to the rack, hitting threes, just in general. And if you look at that, so in the last 4 seasons, right, when trailing by 10 points in the fourth quarter, this stat is pretty crazy, okay? The Wolves are now 5 and 125, okay? 5 wins, 125 losses when they've been down by 10 points in the fourth quarter of the last 4 seasons. That's pretty crazy. Now, however, that 5, right? Keep in mind that 5 wins, 4 of the 5 wins have come under Chris Finch. Something to think about. That's kind of interesting how that worked out. But yeah, that I really liked, how they made that run. They had 2 games. I'm getting an echo again. They had 2 games, left back-to-back nights. We've been playing the 4 out of 6 games a fair amount in the last maybe 5-6 months. But man, it was nice to get that W in. Got that Pacers W as well on Sunday. But that's a telling stat. 1, how bad we are the last 4 years. And 2, the fact that 4 out of the 5 came from Finch. That's not a bad thing, I'd have to say.
And how many 5 and 125 stats? I mean, I suppose the Timberwolves have a ton of stuff like that, but man, that's just crazy. I don't even know what the percentage of that is. That's like 1%, maybe even less than 1%. No, I guess it's probably like 4%, 3%. Anyways, yeah, that's a telling stat. And, that's kind of, Chris, we've been outlining that for the last 3 years about we'll have a lead going into the fourth, and then you're down by 10 all of a sudden, and you end up losing the game. And that's kind of been the MO for those years. And, I'm not all that surprised that that's changed under Finch, but I am surprised at the level of that it got to. I mean, that was 1-121 at some point before the season. So, I mean, that's beyond bad. That's abysmal. And it's nice that changes now. Hopefully, I don't think Finch is going to have a chance to maybe get that to 500, but Jesus, that's very telling what we've been dealing with, But yeah, I mean, talk about McDaniels a little bit. You said he had this guy is just scratching the surface, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a variety of the bench. They've been herky-jerky lately, but the bench has been stepping up. We've mentioned a variety of folks, how they got there, but especially for a while now, but especially the last 2 games out of him has been, he's just done a little bit of everything. 2 nights ago, 18.6 boards, 3 assists, 4 steals, 2 blocks, plus 8 in that. Last night, I think it was like 18 and 9 or something like that. He's really coming around, and we've had to put him in the starting lineup here and there. When Ant went out 2 nights ago at half, we put him in the starting lineup. When D'Lo was out, he was in the starting lineup. Same with Pat B. So he's stepped up, and it does feel like the beginning of that sophomore jinx season where he was falling too much, and he was just, I don't know, it just wasn't really himself. And I think, teams had scouted him, and so he had to kind of just settle in. And now maybe the last 10, 15 games, maybe even more, he's really settled in. And the key is he's not just a guy that's going to, on offense anyway, a guy that's going to sit out there and just try to catch and shoot. When he gets the ball now, he's off the dribble way more. And his finishing at the rim has been such a key. So it is nice. Like I said, he was getting in a bunch of foul problems, just wasn't himself early in the year. And it is nice that it looks like he's over the hump of that sophomore jinx. And like you said, I mean, this guy, we know he's not going to be 225, 230 ever, but once he gets his strength as well, he's getting the confidence. He actually smiled in the game 2 nights ago. So yeah, the guy's getting some confidence. And he's just a shy demeanor guy. Not to say that he's like a negative guy, like he never smiles. He's just, he just has the same look on his face all the time. But it has been really nice to see that because, the bench, like I said, has been a little herky-jerky of late. And here's that second Kings game that they lost. It was like through 3 quarters, the Wolves starters were like plus 16 in 19 minutes. And then the other 17 minutes was like a minus 13. There was maybe one score like for 2 or 3 games in a row where there was only one double-digit score. They had I didn't think they were going to keep getting well over 50 as a bench every game like they were. But I don't know. I like how we're still getting, we need to get better at the bench, obviously, like more consistent and kind of what it did for that 3-week stretch. But yeah, McDaniels, man, he's really shown a whole lot. And in a couple of years, we're definitely going to have to extend him and keep him in there. And everybody says it. Ant, Cat, D'Lo, they all are just, such an important offense and defense. And it is nice to see his offense start to shine now. He's more versatile going to the rack.
Yeah, I mean, Cat said himself, I think last week perhaps that, he thought the bench was winning them games. And I thought, there's some of that to it too, but, Vando's a little banged up and hasn't really been the same. And, we can talk forever about our boy Beasley and shots, and he's just hadn't been hitting them as of late. So the bench has been a little bit erratic, but like you said, a lot of that has to do with maybe scouting. I mean, if you're winning games from your bench, I mean, the opponents have to start to look at your bench a little bit and do a little bit more scouting on that. Not that they hadn't before, but maybe there's a deeper emphasis on it. And, I think it'll get back, like it'll turn another corner and the bench will be as effective as you were, like you say, probably not 50 a night, but, good spell of time where they can get guys out, get them a break and still not, end up in the positions we've seen old Wolf teams get into when they go to their bench. So, when you talk about guys like Vando and McLaughlin and some of the guys that are a little deeper in the bench, I mean, those guys are adequate when they come in, but you would like to see at some point maybe an upgrade at the bottom of the bench. But I mean, how long are you going to have like a 12-man rotation when you actually start playing meaningful games? I don't think that's going to be the case, but throughout the length of a season, you're going to need, player 11, player 12, player 13 down low on the bench, due to injuries or fatigue or whatever it is. And I think there's guys that can come in and play. Problem is, I think a little bit that, like you say, you get a little fatigued, they get a little too much run, perhaps when they shouldn't. And so I guess it's a double-edged sword. And so far it's held up pretty well, but I guess I could see a scenario where you would find the bench lacking coming down the stretch of the season. That makes sense. I mean, you are playing these players, against some pretty good players and under a lot of pressure when the season kind of boils down.
Well, Beasley got hot for about 4 or 5 games just around the trade deadline, so we had to be like, whoa, we can't trade Beasley now. No way can we. No way, dude. No way. But it also was during those bad teams that we played. So if they don't have a great starting lineup, what do they got coming off the bench? You know what I mean? So some of it was – I'm not saying that the bench, those 5 games of 50-plus, and I think it's been 6 so far, maybe 7 in most of them beyond that one, in I think around Thanksgiving. We're in January and February of late, like we've talked about. But some of that, not smoke and mirrors, I'm not saying that, but like I said, if you're playing an inexperienced, not a great starting lineup, not a great team, what do they have off the bench? Probably, a downgrade from that. So I think some of that just crazy 68 points and just dominating and, hey, let's keep the bench in. We're up by 15. Let's see what they can do. And so some of that was that. Some of it is also what you say, like, the fact that as we play tougher games, and obviously in the playoffs, potentially the playoff series, I should say, potentially, how obviously the matchup, has something to do with it. But, yeah, how many minutes are you really going to get? And it's really that late third quarter, first couple minutes of the fourth quarter, and you can do that with the first and second too, that in the playoffs, all of a sudden, a 10-2 run, and you're like, we got to call a timeout. Let's call an extra timeout because we got to stop the momentum and give Cat and somebody a little bit more break. So we got to put them right back on the court. And part of this, as far as being successful off the bench in general with the bench unit, a good chunk of it right now is J-Mac as well. This guy was on a stretch there where he played 136 minutes and hadn't had a turnover. He's only had one in quite some time. I mean, he got up in a 15-game stretch, he had 54 assists to 1 turnover. Now the last couple of games, he's kind of faltered down a little bit, but that's huge because we actually have a backup point guard. When we put Pat Bev in the starting lineup, a handful of games in, maybe 10 games in, maybe not, something like that. It was like, well, we don't have a backup point guard right now because J-Mac wasn't playing that great earlier. But that's so key, man. And I've noticed, because we talked about this a couple of weeks ago where it's like, I don't want to always take out D'Lo at the 6-minute mark. You know what I mean? It just kind of like, well, we haven't even got enough minutes with the big three. I don't want to take them out that early all the time. And I think that we've done that enough. We also have seen Ant not at the 6-minute mark, but coming out a little bit early in that first and third, and then playing with the bench, but not having to run the offense like D'Lo had to. So it really fits nicely for Ant. Obviously, when you're 20, you can play more minutes in general, right? Especially when the playoffs come. But and it's kind of like a time for him to be the outright number one with no D'Lo and no Cat, but J-Mac helps make that possible. So J-Mac has really, we talked about 4 guys or 5 guys off the bench so far in the last couple of shows, and we hadn't talked about McLaughlin, and he's played phenomenal of late, man.
And he adds a different, flavor to the point guard position. I mean, D'Lo's a point guard, in air quotes, because he's a scorer, and he does very nice assists, and he runs the floor very well. So you can call him a point guard, but J-Mac is a point guard, like with a capital P. It's just like, okay, he knows his job is to facilitate the offense. His job is to get assists and move the ball and so
Penetrate.
on. And penetrate, exactly. Drive a dish. So I think you have like a good couple flavors of point guards there where, different things call for different times call for different tools, I guess. And that's sometimes you need a guy that can come in like J-Mac does and feed everybody. And then sometimes you need a guy that can come up and get his like D'Angelo does. So, I mean, different things call for different, but it's been impressive. And like you said, that stat about 54 assists to 1 turnover is huge. As far as, you don't want to turn the ball over, obviously, but, to have the assist ratio as well, I mean, it means you're putting the ball where it needs to be at the right time. And that's really what a point guard's job is, at least a pure point guard anyway. And so that, obviously he's doing a great job. I think some of the guys under him, like Noel and those guys, not really point guards, but, they can play the spot. I think there's another kid too that's kind of a point, like scoring point guards. So they have like a pure one. Like Ricky even wasn't a pure, well, I guess he's pretty close to a pure point guard, but, yeah, I mean, but he's less scoring and more assists. So, and then J-Mac can get his shot if he wants it. And that's the threat that a point guard has to have. So, I mean, I think that you're right about it. I want to see it be more consistent as far as like, or continue to be consistent in the fact that he's getting the assists. And like, I feel like people are kind of forming into their roles and at a really appropriate time, I think. And that has to do with the coaching of Finch and how he's kind of playing everybody and getting them minutes and letting them learn their role. And I think a great example of that is now the rise, I guess you could say, the last few games of McDaniels and what he's able to do is he looks a little freer. He looks a little bit more confident. Like you said, a little bit more of what they want from him. He knows how to produce that. And I think that goes for a lot of guys on that bench. And like I said, we've been impressed with it all season, and that's been really the difference, I think, between last season and this season, among many other differences. But just having a bench that's timed out well with the kind of players that can actually accentuate your starting five. It seems very basic and very obvious, but for years we didn't have that. We'd lose 10-point leads quick, to just lack of a bench. And it seems like we have that now, and it's kind of the weave of the team has kind of come together, and now we're going to head into the break and get these guys a little breather.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And we were talking about, the mental and physical fatigue that just happens to every team at the All-Star break. Our style of defense definitely lends itself to that even more. And one thing of late is the switching on defense more and more. And we've seen it in the last week, 2 weeks, something like that. One game we've really switched almost the whole time. And, part of that is, hey, let's give them a little break here because that style, and even a lot of people spoke at the beginning of the year saying, man, this style of defense is going to wear you out for a whole 82 games. And I actually have some stats that going off of Denver because they run the same thing. And how there is a little lull in the season that happens. We'll get to that in just a second. But, I like that they played a little bit of zone the last couple of games as well, which, you're going to need to do that. They weren't really able to be a good shooting team last night, not just the Timberwolves, but, the opponent last night, Toronto. But, so we said, all right, do zone. Let's try that. But switching in general is such a key in the playoffs. And I like that, it may bring our efficiency and bring some of our defensive numbers down, like it has a little bit. We've also kind of fallen in love with being such a juggernaut on offense. We're averaging since January 1st, like 123 points a game. I think sometimes you do get lulled in these offensive games like that. I think fatigue plays in it, but switching is such a key because they find one or two guys in the playoffs. A good team in a series, Aaron, finds one or two guys that they want to get switched on and just exploit it until they play them off the court.
Yeah, I mean, that's mismatches right there. It's trying to switch to find the guy you want on a different guy. And like you said, a lot of switching, I think, is, and why it wasn't so great in the past is it's a trust thing. I mean, you have to trust that the guy's going to be as intense as you defensively when you switch off. You got to know where to switch and who to switch to so you don't leave, corner threes open and things like that. So, I mean, that's been impressive because it seems like defensively, no, I'm not going to go and say that we're top 5 defensively.
Bad boys Pistons, baby. Oh, sorry.
But we're playing defense. I mean, it's not like,
yes.
It's not the world's greatest defense. It's not the Pistons, like you said, but it's visible, accountable defense, which has been lacking in this franchise for a very long time. And it's such a nice thing to see. And so switching is a part of that. And I think, like you're right, in the playoffs, it's pick and roll, and you pick to find the guy you want to roll on. And that's just kind of how it goes. And like you said, 2 players will eat you alive in that sense. So you have to know what you're switching to, and then you have to make adjustments and who's going to switch and who's not and all that kind of stuff playoff wise. But it's good to get, it's like a series of baby steps here. And I guess we just didn't know how bad we were until we're watching it be kind of done right. And it's like, okay, now we're going to learn switching, and to do that appropriately. Right, yeah. And it's like, yes, these are NBA things that every other team does well. Apparently we didn't know how to do that. So now we have to learn how to do that. And like many other things on the squad, I think we're seeing that, which leads us a little bit, I think, when we talk about later, if you want to broach it now, that not doing anything at the trade deadline, I thought was imperative. And we talked about that for the last couple of weeks about just, just leave it alone and see what you got.
Well, yeah, and we'll talk about that. There is one player, though, that we're talking about switching that since we started doing this that has been getting lit up, and it's probably going to continue to happen. But also, and that has to do with the trade deadline. But the deadline is gone and past, but there is, the buyout market as well. But here's that little this is actually Dane Moore. He was talking to a Denver beat writer, and he was kind of explaining, hey, the first 40 games of this defensive system is just phenomenal, right? You're running all over the place. You're getting steals. You're getting blocks. You're just all over the place, right? Transition buckets. And then for about 20 games, you have this little lull where you hit the wall. Your legs can't move as well as you could. And then all of a sudden the last 15, 20 games, it goes back up. And it literally, like, this is the 18-19 season when they were really doing a lot of this system. And through January 1st, the first couple months, right, the first 40 games, they were 8th in defensive rating. Then for about a month and a half, 2 months, they fell down to 23rd. And in the last chunk, they stepped it back up. And right now, the Wolves through January 1st were 11th, and this is defensive rating. So they were like 8th in points. There's a variety of ways to measure, not just points per game, especially nowadays. But then now, since January 3rd, we bumped down to 17th overall. So I'm not trying to make excuses 100% by any stretch, but that kind of, a lot of boxing, a lot of basketball experts locally were like, man, there's going to be a time where that defense is going to be a little rough. So I think it is a combination of being able to be versatile and throwing 3 different types of defenses at good teams, but also give them a little rest. And I think a guy like, Vando, he has been a little bit, he kind of had a little spark the other day, but he's been slower, clearly. He's even admitted it. And he's banged up a couple different ways. And this week off is going to work wonders for him. So I expect a nice, fresh Vando to come back from the break. And just talking about where we stand here in 7th place, 31-28, the 6th spot where you don't have to play in anything. We're only 2.5 games away, and that's Denver beating Golden State last night, or 2 nights ago, whichever. And then the Clippers are 2.5 games behind. The Lakers are 3.5, and then Portland's a ways back, 6 games back. And obviously, if we've talked about how that 6th spot would be so key because then you're in a series And more than likely, it feels like it's going to be Memphis, which is the most unexperienced team out of everyone there. And don't get me wrong, Memphis is having a great year. They're kind of ahead of schedule too, but they're having a great year. But, I'd rather have them than face Phoenix or Golden State. I think that's pretty basic. But we got to at least get the 7th or 8th spot just to get 2 shots at it. And you'd want that anyway, right? But with the Clippers, first of all, they have a veteran team, and they just got Covington. They just added parts, and they're probably going to get Paul George back. We don't know about Kawhi Leonard just yet because of that. He's off that ACL tear from last year in the playoffs. But this is a team that is damn good, that pushed Phoenix, I think, to Game 6 without Leonard. With just Paul George and a variety of veteran guys and some like a couple of young guys too. So the scenario, they could pass us, to be honest with you. But in Dallas and Denver, I don't know if they're going to come back or down. Denver does have the easiest quote unquote schedule on paper, and we don't know about injuries. Obviously, Dallas is kind of lingering where we don't know if they're going to be able to keep it up. They got rid of Porzingis, which is actually a tough matchup for us. Any big, it usually is, like a big, usually is. But the scenario where it sits right now, to have to play the Clippers, and then if you lose, you'll probably have to play the Lakers, which will be healthy by then, and you can already see they're getting healthier and healthier. It's just kind of a Minnesota sports thing, Aaron. To get, all right, we made the plan. We said we need to get there. You got the Clippers, and if you lose, you got the Lakers. That's just a classic. It really brings me back to under KG when we finally got that home court, that 4th spot, and then by the way, Shaq missed like 30 games that year, so the Lakers who won the championship were actually 5th that year. It's just such a Minnesota thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with that. And like you said, it's like, there's 2 ways of looking at it, I guess. You could say, well, you want to face a great team to see what you have because you're probably not going to go past one series anyway. So you might want to face, one of the better teams. But then again, you kind of want to have a chance at it and see what happens through a longer series. I mean, most likely without, some help of, I won't say a miracle, but at least a little bit of divine intervention, you probably won't get by the Clippers, but you could get by like Memphis, like you said, or something like that. But how much good does that do you? I guess confidence-wise, probably a lot. But as far as like evaluating the team and so on, I think you want to play against the Clippers or something like that. But I expect the Lakers to make a run here, Chris. Like you said, they're getting healthy, and it's LeBron, and it's playoff time, and they got good pieces on that team, so they're going to make a run and probably pass us. They're not that far behind, but Denver's touchable. I think they could do. They're pretty good too as well, but at this point, getting into the dance, 8 sucks, but 7, 6, those you don't want to be the play-in. Obviously, if you stick with the 6, that's optimum because you can really get a look. Like, let's say you lose the play-in game, that doesn't really tell you a whole lot. You want to kind of go into.
Yeah, you'd rather have at least 4 games, of that playoff atmosphere.
Yeah, and just kind of judge everything, but. At this point, beggars can't be choosers. We'll take the play-in game, but we're not. That doesn't do you a heck of a lot for evaluation, and that's kind of what you look at. I mean, you're going to need to find parts around the 3. I think we all can agree we've got a good 3, possible 4, depending on the ascension of McDaniels. Now you can start to look at what are the appropriate parts, and I don't think you can do that with a play-in game, win or lose.
And coming out of the break here, it's pretty funky, right? So we come out of the break and play a back-to-back game, right? Then we have the Saturday and Sunday off, play back-to-back. Then we get a couple days off, back-to-back. It's actually, and then we actually have a little lull there where we have a Sunday off, play Monday, Tuesday, every other, and then another back-to-back. So it's going to be pretty intense. That schedule, they were talking about it on the broadcast, that someone hasn't had to make that run since 2016, which is always fun. But, yeah, coming out of the break, Memphis, Philly, Cleveland, and Golden State, 2 out of the 3 are at home. So that's one of those. If you can go 2-2 in that stretch, that's great because then you get to the OKC, Portland, OKC, Orlando stretch where you could maybe put 4 out of those 5 games together or something like that. And we're just going to have to keep striding. And like you said, as far as like, adding after the season, the fact that we didn't, make a significant move, or not even significant, just adding somebody at the deadline. I will say this. The biggest need right now is a backup center. Just wonder if Naz Reid got hurt. Chris Paul. Cat, foul problems. Like just having a guy who, and then our defensive rebounding is the worst in the league. We're pretty good at offensive rebound. A lot of that has to do with Vando. In the amount of 3-point shots we take, that usually on average, game in, game out, 82 games, the ball comes out a little further, so you do get a little bit better chance of an offensive rebound. But some nights the offensive rebound on the other side, though, is just horrendous. So our defensive rebounding is rough. And as much as I like Naz, he's a good offensive player. And don't get me wrong, he can get block shots, but he's not a consistent rebounder. And even, like, he'll get a block shot kind of catching up to somebody or whatever. Or maybe get burnt, but then make up and then block. He's had some really good blocks. And I like what he's done to his body. He's way more flexible, way more quicker off the dribble. I mean, some of the, dribble dunks, drives he's had are just, they've been great. But point is, if he got hurt, we'd need a backup center. Or, like I said, if Cat gets in foul problems, which, I'm not even going to knock on wood on that. You know what I mean? He can get in foul problems. Of late he hasn't, but overall he could. And so you just need that depth. So I was a little like, you're telling me we couldn't have put a couple of second round picks and, trade some people that aren't even going to play this year any longer. But then again, when I looked more into it, Aaron, there was an overload of teams, playoff teams that wanted that exact thing, a backup center, just for extra depth. So it kind of created a lot of talk, but really no play. There was only one that really got, there was a couple that got traded, but there's plenty that are still there. So, and some of them are going to get bought out. Montrezl Harrell was one that we actually played the other day, who could rebound pretty well. He's not going to shot block, but he's just an energy guy. He can clean up and do some of that dirty work and just be an energy guy. But early March, the buyout market should be able to fill, because we do, a lot of people haven't been talking about this, but we do have one roster spot open. So the fact that we got that open tells me we're probably going to get some sort of veteran backup center.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great assessment. I don't know what else to add to that. I think you're right. I think that, if you are, knock on wood, in a playoff series, they're probably just going to go at Cat and try to get him to collect fouls and try to win games that way, because you're right. I mean, Naz is good at what he does, but he's more of an offensive guy, and you're going to need someone, what if, Cat gets 3 fouls and Naz gets 3 fouls, and what do you have then? You got Vando and a few other parts. I mean, that seems like a pretty good strategy to beat us at this point in time. And so I think you're right about that, but I think that's also like finding a needle in the haystack. I mean, like you said, it's tough to find the guy that you're looking for. I think a lot of teams want to find that guy, and there's just not enough of them, whether that be genetics and just not enough tall people that can do that, or tall basketball players, or whatever it is. You might have to get like a gritty 6'8" guy that can come in and maybe like a Gary Trent kind of clone who can kind of get those rebounds, do the dirty work, but not be, 6'11", 6. There's probably a lot of options as far as that goes, but still be able to score too, because if Cat's out, you're going to need some punch from down low at some point. So that is a very big dilemma, I think, and that'll be definitely stick its rear its head in postseason play, and maybe even coming down the stretch in the season. But I think, as it goes right now, I mean, you could retool now, Reed a little bit, I think, but still, I don't think you're going to find what you're looking for. So that's always been a problem. Again, the forward position, like you said as well. Vando's good, but I think Vando's a better number 2 option in that position and maybe have someone with a little bit more strength in that starter next to Cat, or vice versa, put Cat at the 4 and have the 5. But, I think that's a good assessment. And I don't know what else I think guards were fine. We could probably lose a couple. Forwards with McDaniels rising, I think that helps a little bit. But that's definitely an Achilles heel coming in to the stretch in the postseason. I guess I don't know what you're talking about really about the buyout thing. Can we pick up a guy? I guess I don't know.
Well, there's a buyout market we got to wait till March because then the money goes down a little bit so we can afford it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have to do that, and teams will just buy out a player, just completely buy out. He's off the roster. And it happens every year to multiple guys, and even some named guys that are just a little bit old, that type of thing, or whatever. Or they just like a youngster that's just coming up, and they're like, let's just, make room, and we're going to do a buyout for a guard instead, that type of thing. So that it's there. I'd be surprised if they didn't get somebody. And I'm talking about Band-Aid minutes. I'm not talking about, too much, really just Band-Aid, a handful of minutes twice a game type stuff. That's why it was like, man, trading 2-2s, and some dudes that aren't going to play, that would have been nice. But it did kind of spark up that the teams just held. They're like, you know what, we're asking. There's just it's too much. They wanted too much for a guy that we're not going to use a ton. And maybe once you get to the playoffs, it matters. Kind of matters the matchup. Some of these guys may not even play a lot. So then you're like, well, we just gave up assets that we could do as as the buyout market, or maybe in the free agency or a trade or whatever. It just Nas is too small to play on a bigger center, and he's too slow. He's basically, when we talked about who they're going to switch on, Nas is who they've been doing ever since we've been switching. He's been getting cooked. So that's one of those things where you're like, not only do we need it, but if we're going to switch, he's going to get cooked, on average anyway. But not to say he's improved his game in a variety of ways, though, and he's a solid player. I'm not trying to rip on him over the top, but it is what it is. Speaking of, next year in the free agency, we're not going to get into the free agent market per se, but there's not. First of all, in free agency, you're always overspending, right? And they made the decision to go, well, in the free agency, if we were going to pay someone $13 million, what are we looking at here? Like I said, you always overpay in the free agent market, period. And so they said, you know what? Pat Bev right there. He's a shooter. He's a, on-the-ball defender. He's a leader. Even when he's been hurt with that groin, you think he's a player assistant coach. You know what I mean? He's just been wonderful for the squad. And so it was good news to know that we got him extended for a year, whether it's trade him next year, whether he stays, whether, he's healthy next year too, and we give him another extension. I just think that they looked at the market, the availability, and said, you know what? This money right here is probably well spent.
Yeah, better to keep him, I think, than to just flounder without him. And he's been such a spark defensively for this team. I'm not going to put the whole defensive turnaround on him, but I'll give him a nice chunk of it. And I think that his attitude and maybe just getting in guys' faces about it probably helped. Now, Butler tried to do that, but that's Jimmy Butler as a whole.
He really wanted to fight him, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to say that Beverly's at least worth that. Now, if you get to a point where you think you can move Beverly, then we're doing pretty damn good next season. So, I just think he's really made his mark here quickly on some of these young guys, and it's a young team still, and they need to see some example. And I think, for love him or hate him, most people like him, but some people don't. I think he's been a good example, at least to get these guys. We've seen the results, Chris. We've seen the pickup in defense and intensity, and some other ones too. But that's a major one that I've seen. And if that's Pat Bev, then 1 year's not enough to me. I think you give him more, but they'll settle in on what they settle in on. And so, yeah, I'm glad that he got re-signed. And the stretch is where it's all going to count, Chris. And we're going to get there in 20 games or so, but that's when it's going to count. I mean, you get a tough stretch of games coming up here, but then you said it lightens up a little bit so you can make up whatever you lost in that last stretch. But you need a guy like Pat Beverly, just to keep the defensive intensity going because, we've swooned in a lot of seasons prior to this, had a great first half. Well, I won't say great first half, but an adequate first half. And then, down the tubes the second half of the season. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying we've seen it before. And a guy like that, I think, is a stopper for things like that.
Yeah, I mean, the last time beyond the Butler year was I think it was 2012 or 13, that 40 and 42. But we kind of peaked a little bit late in that year to get even to 40 and 42. And I think the reason why they didn't extend him longer is just because, he has been banged up this year. And then if you look at the last few years, I mean, he's 33 going on 34, and his playing style he's probably more like 37, We were talking about it off air about Anthony Barwell. How old is he? Well, it's kind of like a boxer. It's like, that's not age. What kind of wear and tear does he have on him? And so I think that plays into it where we can always extend him again. And if we let him go to free agency, then we, signed him, we wouldn't be able to, even if there was a trade available, we'd have to wait till January 15th because of the contract stuff, the bargaining agreements and all that. But here's another major factor. So, technically Beverly has 2 years, or not Beverly, but Beasley has 2 years on his deal left, but the last year is a team option. So heading to the trade deadline next year, you'd have Beasley and Bev potentially on the block, and I'm just talking here, or this offseason, by the way, 28.5 in expiring contracts, 28.5 million, whether it's end of next year, trading something to get a bigger piece because those teams are like, hey, we want to free up some money, so we'll make the trade, we'll get a pick from you, and then we'll go in the off season and have some cap room. And if they like Beasley, well, then you got a team option to keep him if you like. So it's much easier to trade Beasley next year than this year. And we kind of knew from his the off the court stuff in this summer that was going to be the case. So I think it just plays well, but I really think it's just, can you really give him a 2 or 3 year extension when he hasn't, he's always missed about 20 games the last few years. So I think that plays into it as well. So, wanted to touch on one more thing. What was it? Can't remember. But overall, I'm pretty damn happy, man, where we're at, right? I mean, we can't really complain too much considering that we were one of the hardest hit teams as far as the COVID stuff for starters. That was a little rough. We've been, knock on wood, pretty healthy. We heard about Ant's, jumper knee with some soreness, some of those games where he wasn't able to explode like he did. Then the last handful of games, he said he feels great. Hopefully that ankle is just a little tweak. Like we said, Vando, I think, is going to be – everyone's going to be healthy coming back that way, but I think Vando especially because what he's done this year, defense, offensive rebound, his passing, his finishing, to me, I think we're pretty good at the four, a lot better than we were last year and the year before, that's for sure. But any overall thoughts just in general as we kind of wrap up some of this and kind of finish out talking a little bit of the Gophers anyway?
I think we touched on just about everything we wanted to move to the Gophers, I guess. They managed to get a win, Chris, but at some point we're at a point where it's like we kind of know what the story is for them this season, and it's like, well, yeah, pick up a win here, pick up a thing here, somebody plays well, you start to look at parts and pieces and say, okay, well, this is going to work. Look at the system, look at, what's going on, but at the same time, it's just kind of like, as Fleck would say, year zero at this point. I mean, it's a piecemeal team done over the summer, and it's nice to see them, playing together and all that, but it's a talent deficit at this point and a longevity deficit at this point. So, I mean, it's nice to see them get a win and, but then they come out and and lay an egg against them. I don't know. I mean, where do you stand on all that?
Yeah, I mean, I did like just for, morale to get that Penn State win because they had their worst performance against Nebraska. The old vet Curry had a nice breakout game. But the last two games, the second half, I mean, that Ohio State game, even the Penn State game today was rough. And that kind of stuck up on me. I was like, oh, that's right. They had that little break, so they had to play today during the day. But, a key thing, like down the stretch of the second half of that Ohio State game, which, by the way, we were right in the game, 47-20 in the second half, dude. That was super rough. But, you can look at the difference between, Peyton Williams in that win. He had 10 assists against Penn State, turned right back around and had 1 assist. And, too many turnovers. And I really think I do like Luke Lowy has actually been a lot more consistent the last 8 games or something like that. But I think they're just wearing down, man. I think they're really, really wearing down. It's just finally, the wheels have come off all the way. But technically speaking, to get more practices and more games, the NIT is still obtainable, but yeah, we got to start winning some games down the stretch here because we only got a few weeks left,
And that bench, Chris, it just needs to be, we need to have one,
Yeah.
You can't play these minutes and try to come down the stretch, especially in the Big Ten, as rough of a league as it is. I mean, you're going to get worn down. And you play games like Maryland and Illinois, and these guys are going to beat the crap out of you, and that's kind of what's been happening. I do like Lowy. I think that's a piece going forward. Battle's nice. Willis at times is great. But like I said, you're going to need to have more than 6 guys and sometimes 5 to play in the Big Ten. So like we said, we put the team together. Everybody kind of knew what was going to be. And I think if you can get to the NIT and get those practices, Chris, that's a win for the season. I think that's actually a positive outcome that you could, no matter how well you do in the NIT, I think just getting there is probably something to strive for and get the extra practices and actually play in some tournament of some type. And I think that's important for the growth, but at the same time, it's like you've got to get stronger in the Big Ten. You've got to get better shooting, better defense. There's a lot that you need to have, but we all kind of knew that walking in.
And if any team, any program is capable of making a run in the NIT, I mean, come on. We own the tournament. I mean, we got belts and everything. So anyway, we'll be back next week. The games don't start for the Timberwolves till Thursday, where they play Thursday and Friday right off the jump. I think it's 4 games, 6 nights coming right back at you. So they better kick the feet up and take the ice baths and do some hot yoga or whatever you got to do. Sit on a beach with, some straws in your glasses. Whatever you got to do, they got to do it. They definitely got to do it. But it has been a fun season so far. And knock on wood, I mean, if nothing happens horribly anyway to the Big Three, they're gonna be in the play-in at least, just off of having a 7-game lead or whatever. That's not going anywhere. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see, man. But anyway, we'll be back next week. Enjoy the weekend. Peace.